In the comm cabin of a commercial airplane, Mr. Jonathan Hayes' routine business trip takes a dramatic turn when his 7-year-old daughter, Aria, is left in first class under the care of flight attendant Grace. What starts as a quiet journey soon unravels into a moment of injustice when Aria faces harsh treatment from Grace, who lets her prejudice and frustration surface in cruel ways. As Aria struggles in silence, her father, a humble but powerful man, checks on her throughout the flight, unaware of Grace's true behavior. But when Jonathan witnesses Grace slap his daughter, the comm turns to chaos. What Grace doesn't know is that Jonathan owns the very airline she works for, and her apology comes too late. Before we dive into this story of power, humility, and standing up for what's right, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, real-life stories. The bustling terminal of Ocean View International Airport hummed with its usual symphony of rolling luggage, hurried footsteps, and a constant drone of announcements echoing through the vast space. Through the sea of travelers, a striking pair caught the eye, a tall, distinguished black man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit holding hands with a bright-eyed 7-year-old girl whose pink backpack bounced with every skip. "Daddy, look, that's our plane." Aria Hayes pointed excitedly through the floor-to-ceiling windows at a gleaming white aircraft with blue trim. Her father, Jonathan Hayes, smiled warmly at his daughter's enthusiasm, though his mind was partially occupied with the upcoming business meeting that had forced this last-minute flight arrangement. "That's right, sweetheart," he said, giving her small hand a gentle squeeze. "That's one of ours." A group of business travelers walked past, doing double takes as they recognized the airline CEO. Jonathan noticed but maintained his focus on his daughter. He'd worked hard to keep Aria's life as normal as possible despite his position. Today was one of those rare occasions where he'd given in to her pleading to join him on a business trip, mainly because it coincided with her school break. "Remember what we talked about?" Jonathan asked as they approached the priority boarding line. Aria nodded solemnly, her dark curls bouncing. "Best behavior, inside voice, and no jumping on the seats even if they're super bouncy." Jonathan chuckled, reaching down to adjust the collar of her yellow dress. "That's my girl. And what else? If I need anything, ask the flight attendant politely," she recited, beaming with pride at remembering all the rules. As they made their way down the jet bridge, Jonathan felt a familiar pang of guilt. He'd have to leave her alone in first class while he attended to an urgent meeting with investors in economy. It wasn't ideal, but at least she'd be comfortable. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes." The captain greeted him warmly at the aircraft door, extending his hand. "It's an honor to have you aboard today." Jonathan shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Captain Rivera. This is my daughter, Aria." Aria gave a small curtsy, making both men smile. "It's nice to meet you, Captain." "The pleasure is all mine, young lady," the captain replied, tipping his hat playfully. "I hope you enjoy your flight with us today." As they made their way to first class, a flight attendant with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a practiced smile approached them. Her name tag read Grace. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "Can I help you find your seats?" Jonathan gestured to 2A and 2B. "We're right here." "Thank you, Grace. I have a favor to ask. I need to attend to some business in economy during the flight, and I was hoping you could keep an eye on my daughter." Grace's smile widened, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, sir. We'll take excellent care of her." She turned to Aria, her voice taking on a slightly condescending tone. "Aren't you lucky to be flying in first class today?" Aria shifted closer to her father, picking up on something in Grace's tone that made her slightly uncomfortable. Jonathan, distracted by an incoming text about his meeting, missed the subtle change in the atmosphere. "Thank you, Grace." "Aria, sweetheart, let's get you settled." Jonathan helped his daughter into her window seat, stowing her backpack underneath. He pulled out her favorite stuffed elephant, Mr. Snuggles, and placed it in her lap. "Now remember, I'll be back to check on you as soon as I can. If you need anything at all, Grace will help you." "Okay." He kissed the top of her head. "Okay, Daddy," Aria said softly, already missing him even though he hadn't left yet. Jonathan turned to Grace once more. She might get a little nervous during takeoff. Could you make sure she has some water? Absolutely. Grace assured him with that same plastic smile. She'll be in good hands. As Jonathan reluctantly made his way to economy, Grace's demeanor underwent a dramatic transformation. The moment he was out of sight, her smile vanished, replaced by a look of barely concealed contempt. Stay in your seat and don't cause any trouble, she said curtly to Arya before turning on her heel and walking away. Arya hugged Mr. Snuggles closer, confused by the sudden change. She watched as other passengers boarded, Grace greeting each one with varying degrees of warmth. Though none received the icy treatment she had just experienced, the plane filled quickly, and soon the safety demonstration began. Arya tried to catch Grace's eye during the presentation, hoping to ask for the water her father had mentioned, but the flight attendant deliberately avoided looking in her direction. As the plane took off, Arya's ears started to hurt. She remembered her father saying she should swallow to make it better, but she really needed some water. Gathering her courage, she pressed the call button. Grace appeared moments later, her face tight with annoyance. What? May I please have some water? Arya asked politely, her voice small. Grace reached up and switched off the call button. Service hasn't started yet. You'll have to wait. She walked away without another word, leaving Arya fighting back tears. A few minutes later, Grace began serving drinks to other first-class passengers, completely skipping Arya's row. When Arya tried to speak up, Grace cut her off with a sharp look that made the words die in her throat. The businessman across the aisle noticed and frowned. "Excuse me," he called to Grace. "I think you missed this young lady." Grace's fake smile returned instantly. "Oh, I'll be taking care of her separately, as arranged with her father." The lie rolled smoothly off her tongue, and the businessman nodded, satisfied with the explanation. As the flight progressed, the cabin grew chilly. Arya wrapped her arms around herself, wishing she had worn something warmer than her short-sleeve dress. Once again, she pressed the call button. Grace appeared, visibly irritated. "What now?" "I'm cold," Arya whispered. "Could I please have a blanket?" Grace stalked off without responding. A moment later, she returned and practically threw a blanket at Arya, not even bothering to remove it from its plastic wrapper. The package hit Arya in the chest before falling to her lap. "Anything else?" Grace asked sarcastically. When Arya shook her head, Grace leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Listen, little girl, I don't know who you think you are, but this isn't your private jet. Stop bothering me with every little thing." Arya's lower lip trembled as she struggled with the plastic wrapper, her small fingers unable to find the opening. She could feel Grace watching her with approval, but the flight attendant made no move to help. "Spoiled little princess," Grace muttered under her breath as she walked away. Probably never heard the word no in her life. Arya finally managed to open the blanket, wrapping it around herself and Mr. Snuggles. She didn't understand why Grace was being so mean to her.